All right, here we go with section 6 in your lifetimes. Pardon me. In early January 2020, government officials in Wuhan, China reported the first known death from a new, dangerous strain of coronavirus known as COVID 19. Although the government cut off air, road, and rail traffic to and from Wuhan to prevent the virus's spread, it soon spread to the rest of the world. By March 11th, the World Health Organization elevated COVID 19 to a global pandemic. The United States emerged as one of the countries hit hardest by the pandemic. The Trump administration suspended travel from China and then barred non-citizens from other countries, declaring a national emergency. By the end of March, the U.S. unemployment rate had risen to close to 15%. Spiraling COVID 19 infections taxed the healthcare system to the breaking point, with overcrowded hospitals and a dearth of essential supplies from masks to ventilators. With only 4% of the world's population, the United States had 22% of confirmed COVID deaths by September of 2020. By the end of December, the United States recorded 300,000 deaths. In 2018, Trump dismantled the Global Public Health Task Force, leaving the United States less capable of mounting an early and coordinated response to the pandemic. As hospitalizations and deaths increased, Trump downplayed the severity of the virus and contributed to the spread of misinformation. States scrambled to contain the spread of COVID 19 through testing, tracing the contacts of people who became ill, and issuing mask mandates and stay at home orders. With businesses shuttered, Congress passed bills providing $3 trillion in relief. Many Americans received stimulus checks, and the government provided small businesses access to special loans and grants. While many Americans accepted health officials' guidance, others saw public health measures as infringements on individual liberty. Often, the heated disagreements over public health policies mirrored partisan divides. Many more Republican than Democratic officials were skeptical of public health guidance. The polarized response to the virus revealed many Americans' deep distrust of government authority. Online platforms such as Facebook were designed to provide their users content they liked, even if the information was false. The Trump administration invested billions of dollars of federal funds into public and private partnerships for the rapid development and delivery of a vaccine against COVID 19. By December 2020, a vaccine rollout had begun. When Biden took office in January 2021, he declared the goal of vaccinating 70% of Americans by July 4th. But with vaccine hesitancy gaining strength, only around 60% of adults in the U.S. had been vaccinated by the fall of 2021, significantly less than many other developed countries. Long-standing structural inequalities contributed to a disproportionate impact of the virus on minority communities. African Americans, Hispanics, and Native Americans became sick and died at higher rates than white Americans due to higher rates of chronic illness, poverty, inconsistent access to health care, and more often living in multi-generational households. African Americans and Latinos frequently worked in low-wage frontline essential services such as hospitality, with more exposure to the virus. African Americans had twice the death rate of white Americans. Black Americans' grievances over structural inequalities and police violence led to what many hoped would be a pivotal moment of national racial transformation. On May 5, 2020, 46-year-old George Floyd was arrested by Minneapolis police on suspicion of using a counterfeit $20 bill. Floyd was placed in a chokehold with an officer's knee on his neck and pleaded for air until he died, filmed by a witness's cell phone. George Floyd's murder awakened many Americans to the problem of racially discriminatory policing. Black Americans in 2020 were more than twice as likely as whites to be shot and killed by police. Demonstrations for the Black Lives Matter movement spread across cities and sparked demands to defund the police by reallocating police funds to social services such as mental health treatment. The House of Representatives approved the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act twice, but it failed to pass the Republican-controlled Senate. Cities such as Seattle banned chokeholds and Maryland limited no-knock warrants. Americans remain deeply divided over policing and the protests. Despite the outpouring of protest, the numbers of killings in police custody and the economic grievances faced by poor blacks have continued largely unchanged. Former Vice President Joe Biden became the Democratic nominee for president after a heated primary campaign. He faced stiff competition from his party's progressive wing. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts called for raising taxes on the nation's billionaires, providing free college tuition to rein in rising student debt, and establishing universal health care. With the party's backing, however, Biden, who favored more moderate proposals, won the nomination. Biden chose Senator Kamala Harris of California as his running mate, the first female vice presidential candidate of African American and Asian American heritage. Biden's working-class upbringing and disaffection among many who voted for Trump in 2016 allowed him to regain the swing states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Biden triumphed in the Electoral College 306 to 232 and carried the popular vote 51% to 47%. Democrats saw their House majority shrink, but they gained a narrow control of the Senate after winning 2 runoff races in Georgia. Voter turnout in 2020 was the highest since 1900 due to passionate polarization over Trump's presidency and increased mail-in voting carried out as a public health measure in the midst of the pandemic. In 2020, 43% of voters cast their ballots by mail. The increased volume of mail-in balloting required counting millions of ballots that arrived shortly before each state's deadline. The resulting delay set the stage for Trump's unsubstantiated claims that votes had been fraudulently found. Trump spread unfounded claims that mail-in voting would be substantially fraudulent and urged his followers to vote in person. With in-person ballots generally counted first, early returns favored Trump. Late on election night, he claimed that he had won even though many states were still counting millions of legally cast ballots. When counting was finished, Biden proved to be the winner. Trump refused to concede. Trump urged the Georgia Republican Secretary of State to find 11,800 votes, which would erase Biden's slim majority in the state. Trump lobbied Vice President Pence to reject the state-certified results, which would allow the election to be decided by the House of Representatives, where Republicans control the majority of the state delegations. Pence refused, citing his oath to defend the Constitution. On January 6, 2021, Congress assembled to ratify the election results. Trump held a rally at the National Mall, railing against the fake news media and a stolen election. At Trump's urging, thousands of those present then marched to the Capitol. A group of his supporters instigated violence by storming the Capitol building and occupying the Senate chambers, sending lawmakers into hiding for safety. More than 140 police officers were injured, and 1 police officer and 4 Trump loyalists died. In the immediate aftermath, Democrats and top Republican lawmakers condemned Trump for his role in the Capitol attack. Charged with incitement of insurrection, House Democrats impeached Trump for a second time. The Senate trial failed to convict. Minority Leader Mitch McConnell argued that the Senate had no jurisdiction to convict Trump because he was no longer president. Since then, most Republican lawmakers have downplayed what happened. Many Republican lawmakers backed Trump's unsubstantiated allegations of widespread voter fraud. In 2021, Republicans in states they controlled used the concerns generated by claims of voter fraud to pass new laws making it harder to vote. Justified as a means to ensure ballot integrity, these laws are reminiscent of earlier efforts to suppress voting by blacks and the poor. Joe Biden was inaugurated on January 20th, 2021. The day's events celebrated national traditions of inclusiveness, immigration, and multiculturalism. 2 weeks earlier, on January 5th, Democrats secured control of Congress when Republican Senators David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler lost their re-election bids in a special runoff race. Democrats Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff became the first black and the first Jewish senators from Georgia. This marked a historic turning point in a state with a deep history of racial discrimination and anti-Semitism, the success of which was largely founded on the support of well-mobilized black Democratic voters. So, that's the end of Section 6. We'll be back for 7.